The storm came without warning, turning the dirt road into a river of mud that sucked at the wagon wheels with each lurching rotation. Lightning split the purple-black sky, illuminating the barren landscape in harsh, fleeting moments. Inside the rickety coach, Temperance Hartwell pressed her mother's cast-iron skillet against her chest, feeling its cold weight through the thin fabric of her only good dress.
"Hold tight, miss,"
the driver shouted over the howling wind.
"Taking a shortcut to get us there faster."
Water poured through gaps in the canvas covering, soaking through her woolen shawl. The skillet grew slick in her hands, but she wouldn't let go. It was all she had left of home of Mother, who'd pressed it into her hands with trembling fingers just before the fever took her. "This fed our family for 20 years. She'd whispered, "Let it be your anchor, Temperance." The wagon hit something hard, throwing her against the wooden side. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she bit back the cry. Ladies didn't complain. Ladies endured, though after what had happened back in Missouri, she wondered if anyone would ever consider her a lady again. Thunder crashed overhead as the wagon skidded to a halt. Through the rain-blurred window, she glimpsed wooden buildings hunched against the storm like beaten dogs. This couldn't be right. Mr. Lattimore had described his ranch as prosperous, with whitewashed fences and a proper 2-story house. "McGray Ranch," the driver hollered, already throwing her single carpetbag into the mud. "End of the line." "Wait," Temperance struggled with the door latch. "This isn't you said Lattimore Ranch." But the driver was already climbing back onto his seat, water streaming from his hat brim. "Same difference, they're neighbors. Ain't they? You can sort it out with them." "Please." She stumbled out into the downpour, immediately sinking ankle-deep in mud. "You can't leave me here." The whip cracked. The wagon lurched forward, wheels spraying filth across her skirts. Within moments, it vanished into the storm, leaving her alone in the courtyard of a ranch that looked more like a last chance than a new beginning. Rain plastered her hair to her scalp, turned her dress into a sodden weight. The buildings around her were rough-hewn, temporary-looking things, as if the men who built them expected to move on before the wood had time to weather. No flowers, no curtains in the windows, just mud and darkness and the smell of wet horses and unwashed men. A door banged open. Yellow lamplight spilled across the porch of what must be the main house. Men emerged 3, 4, then more drawn by the commotion. They stopped at the edge of the porch roof's protection, staring at her like she was some exotic creature blown in by the storm. "Well, well," one of them drawled, elbowing his companion. "What have we here?" "Looks like a drowned rat in a dress," another replied, and laughter rippled through the group. Temperance straightened her spine, clutching the skillet tighter. "I'm looking for Mr. McGraw. I believe there's been a mistake." More laughter. Rougher this time. A man with missing teeth stepped forward, squinting at her through the rain. Only mistake I see is a woman standing in our courtyard like she's got business here. I was hired as a cook for the Lattimore Ranch." Her teeth chattered, but she forced the words out clear and steady. "The driver left me here by error." "Cook," the gap-toothed man slapped his thigh. "Boys, she says she can cook. Can barely stand upright in that fancy dress." Someone called out, "Bet she ain't never seen the working end of a stove." Heat flooded her cheeks despite the cold rain. They didn't know about the month she'd spent keeping house after Father lost his store to drink and cards. They didn't know about the nights she'd stretched one chicken to feed 5 mouths, or how she'd learned to make filling meals from cornmeal and whatever wild greens she could gather. They didn't know about James Fletcher either, with his smooth words and false promises, who'd convinced her to run away with him only to abandon her at a stage stop when his wife sent word she'd take him back. That shame followed her like a shadow, whispered about in every place she'd tried to find work since... Enough. The single word cut through the laughter like a blade. The men fell silent, stepping aside as another figure emerged from the doorway. He moved with an uneven gait, favoring his left leg. But there was nothing weak about the way he carried himself. Tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and clothes that had seen better days. A scar ran along his throat, pale against sun-weathered skin. His eyes found hers across the muddy yard, gray as the storm clouds, just as unforgiving. "You're at McGray Ranch," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "Lattimore's place is 15 miles south. In this weather, might as well be 1,500. Temperance's heart sank. 15 miles. No wagon, no horse, no choice. Then I apologized for the intrusion. She took a step back, though she had nowhere to go. "If you could perhaps spare a man to drive me." "No one's riding out in this storm." He studied her with those storm cloud eyes, taking in her sodden dress, her death grip on the skillet, the way she swayed on her feet. "Wade, get her inside before she collapses. Rest of you, back to your business." "But Asa," the gap-toothed man Wade protested. "We can't just—" "I said get her inside." There was iron in his voice now. And the men scattered like chickens, Wade grudgingly gesturing for her to follow. The main house was barely warmer than outside, but at least it was dry. A single large room served as kitchen, dining hall, and gathering place. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its meager fire doing little to chase away the damp. The smell of tobacco, burnt coffee, and unwashed bodies made her stomach turn. "You can sleep by the fire tonight," Asa said, his uneven footsteps crossing the plank floor. "Come morning, we'll see about getting you to Lattimore's." "Thank you." The words came out as a whisper. She was shaking now, from cold or exhaustion or the simple relief of being out of the storm. He paused at the doorway to what must be his private quarters. "What's your name?" "Temperance Hartwell." Something flickered across his face, amusement. Maybe, or irony. "Temperance, well, you'll need plenty of that here." He disappeared into the darkness beyond the door. Wade spat tobacco juice into a tin cup. "Don't get comfortable. Missy, Mister, Asa might have a soft spot for strays, but this ain't no place for a woman, especially not a woman with your kind of history." Ice formed in her stomach. "My history? Oh, we hear things, even way out here." His grin was ugly. "James Fletcher's woman. Weren't you before he threw you back like a fish too small to keep?" The skillet handle bit into her palms. She wanted to deny it, to explain, but what was the point? The story had already been written. All that mattered now was surviving until morning. She found a spot near the hearth, as far from the bedrolls and scattered belongings of the ranch hands as possible. The floor was hard beneath her, but she'd slept in worse places these past months. Pulling her wet shawl tighter, she curled around her mother's skillet and closed her eyes. Sleep wouldn't come. The storm rattled the windows, and somewhere in the darkness, men snored and muttered. Her dress clung to her skin, clammy and cold. Every time she dozed, she jerked awake, certain someone was standing over her. Dawn came gray and reluctant, seeping through the cracks in the walls. Her clothes had dried stiff and uncomfortable. When she sat up, every muscle protested. The room was empty save for the dying embers in the fireplace. She stood, brushing futilely at her ruined skirt, and nearly jumped when a voice spoke from the shadows. "Storms passed, but the roads are still mud soup. You're not going anywhere today." Asa stood by the window, coffee mug in hand, in daylight. She could see him better, the lines carved deep around his eyes, the way he held himself carefully, like a man accustomed to pain. "I can work for my keep," she said quickly. "I really can cook. My mother taught me, and I kept house for—" She stopped, not wanting to mention her father's failures. He studied her over the rim of his mug. "Can you make biscuits?" "Yes." "Coffee that doesn't taste like tar?" "Yes." "Can you handle a kitchen full of hungry men who haven't seen a woman in months?" She thought of Wade's ugly grin, the laughter from the night before, but she also thought of her mother's voice, When life gives you nothing but stones, build something anyway. Yes, he nodded once, decisive. Then make breakfast. Prove you're worth the food you'll eat. After that, we'll see. The kitchen was a disaster, grease-blackened pots, flour bins that housed more mice than flour, a stove that looked like it hadn't been properly cleaned since construction, but it was a chance. She rolled up her sleeves, tied her ruined shawl around her waist as an apron, and got to work. The men filed in as the smell of baking biscuits filled the air, suspicious and hungry in equal measure. She kept her eyes on her work, ladling out portions of gravy thick enough to stick to ribs, biscuits light enough to melt on the tongue, coffee strong but smooth. Wade made a show of poking at his food. Probably poisoned, he announced, but he cleaned his plate just the same. When the meal was done and the men had trudged out to their work, Asa remained. He hadn't eaten much, she noticed, just picked at his food while watching the others. The roads won't be clear for days, he said finally. Maybe a week. You can stay until then. Keep cooking. I'll pay you fair wages. And after that, he shrugged. Lattimore might still need a cook. Or you might find you like it here. His mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. Though I doubt that. She should have been planning her escape to the civilized comfort of the Lattimore ranch. Should have been counting the days until she could leave this rough place behind. But as she watched him limp toward the door, something made her speak. Why did you let me stay when the others clearly didn't want me here? He paused, not turning around. My mother died when I was 12. Fever took her, just like yours. I'm guessing all I had left was her Bible. Still got it. His hand went unconsciously to the scar on his throat. A person needs something to hold on to, even if it's just a cast iron skillet. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the kitchen with dirty dishes and the first fragile hope she'd felt in months. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, turning the puddles to mirrors. It wasn't much of a beginning, but it was something. The first week tested every ounce of strength Temperance possessed. Each morning began in darkness, fumbling to light the temperamental stove that belched smoke whenever the wind shifted. Her first attempt at flapjacks turned to charcoal. The coffee boiled over, flooding the stovetop with bitter brown liquid that took an hour to clean. Looks like someone murdered breakfast, Wade announced to the assembled hands, holding up a blackened disc that might once have been edible. Any of you boys brave enough to risk it? Laughter echoed off the rafters. Someone made retching sounds. Heat flooded her cheeks, but she kept her hands steady as she set down fresh plates. There's cornmeal mush if you prefer, she said quietly, and yesterday's biscuits. Yesterday's biscuits could shoe a horse, another hand called out. Asa sat at the head of the table, silent as always. He took one of the burnt flapjacks, poured molasses over it, and ate it without expression. The room fell quiet, watching him chew and swallow. Coffee's good, he said finally. Rest needs work. It was the closest thing to kindness she'd gotten, and she treasured it through the rest of that humiliating meal. Days blurred together in a rhythm of work. Her hands, already rough from months of hardship, developed new calluses from hauling water, scrubbing pots, kneading endless batches of dough. The lye soap cracked her skin until her knuckles bled. She wrapped them in torn strips of petticoat and kept working. Slowly, painfully, she learned the stove's moods. The left side ran hot, good for searing meat, death to anything delicate. The right barely held heat unless you fed it constantly. The oven door stuck, requiring a sharp rap in just the right spot to open. Getting better. Asa noted one evening, finishing his second helping of beef stew. Almost edible. Wade snorted. If you like your meat tough as saddle leather, then cook your own, Asa replied mildly, and Wade shut his mouth. She was elbow deep in dishwater, watching the sun sink behind the distant mountains, when she heard it a small voice, barely a whisper. Miss, She turned to find a girl of perhaps 6 years standing in the doorway, all knobby knees and tangled yellow hair. Behind her lurked another child, smaller, thumb firmly planted in her mouth. "Hello," Temperance said, drying her hands on her makeshift apron. "I didn't know there were children here." "We're not supposed to bother you." The older girl clutched something behind her back. "Uncle Asa said." "Uncle Asa?" She filed that information away. "Well, you're not bothering me. What's your name?" "Lydia, that's Annie." She jerked her head toward the smaller girl. "She don't talk much, not since Papa died." Temperance's heart clenched. Orphans. Then it explained their presence at this rough place, though not why Asa had taken them in. "What have you got there?" she asked gently. Lydia produced a cloth doll, its dress torn nearly in half. "Can you fix her? I tried, but I ain't good with needles." The doll was a sad little thing, made of scraps and stuffed with what felt like dried grass. But it was clearly loved, the face worn smooth from small hands, the yarn hair braided and rebraided countless times. "Of course I can fix her. Would you like to help? I'll teach you." Annie crept closer, still silent but watching with wide blue eyes. Temperance found her sewing kit, one of the few possessions she'd managed to keep, and settled on a crate near the fire. The girls pressed close, warm and trusting as puppies. "First, we'll patch this tear," she explained, demonstrating small, even stitches. "See, like this." Lydia tried to copy her, tongue poking out in concentration. Her stitches were crooked, too loose, but Temperance praised her efforts. "Much better than my first attempts. I once sewed my sampler to my skirt." That earned a giggle, the first she'd heard in this place. Even Annie's solemn face cracked into an almost smile. They were so absorbed that none of them heard the approaching footsteps until a shadow fell across their work. "Evening, ladies," Wade drawled, whiskey heavy on his breath. "Having ourselves a little sewing circle." Lydia shrank back. Annie's thumb returned to her mouth. "The girls needed help with a repair," Temperance said evenly. "We're nearly finished." "Ain't that sweet?" He swayed closer, and she could smell the tobacco juice on his breath. "Playing mama to McGraw's strays, though I reckon you know all about being a stray yourself." "That's enough." She stood, placing herself between Wade and the children. "The girls need to get ready for bed." "Do they now?" His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Maybe I need something too. Maybe you could be real nice. Show me some of that hospitality you've been saving for our—" The click of a hammer being pulled back froze them all. Let her go." Asa stood in the doorway, a Colt .45 steady in his hand. "Now." Wade's grip loosened but didn't release. "Just having a conversation, boss. No harm meant." "I said now?" Something in Asa's voice, quiet, deadly certain, penetrated even Wade's whiskey-soaked brain. He released her wrist, stumbling back a step. "Get out," Asa said. "Sober up. You pull this again, you'll be looking for work elsewhere." Wade lurched toward the door, pausing to spit at Asa's feet.
"Getting awful protective of your new pet, ain't you?"
Asa didn't respond, just waited until Wade disappeared into the darkness. Then he uncocked the pistol, tucking it back into his belt. "Girls, Miss Hartwell was right. Time for bed." "But Uncle Asa," Lydia began. "Now." They scurried off, clutching the mended doll. Temperance rubbed her wrist, knowing it would bruise by morning. "Thank you," she said quietly. He studied her with those storm-gray eyes. "Wade's a mean drunk, but he's good with horses. That's the only reason he's still here." A pause. "You hurt?" "No." "You're lying." She almost smiled at his blunt assessment. "I've had worse." "That doesn't make it right." He moved into the kitchen, favoring his bad leg more than usual. "The girls, they shouldn't have bothered you." "They didn't bother me. They're sweet children." "They're my brother's daughters. He died last winter. Pneumonia." He stared into the dying fire. Their mother passed 2 years before that. Childbirth fever. I'm sorry. He shrugged. Life out here is hard. Harder on women and children. His gaze found hers again, which is why most have the sense to stay away. I didn't have much choice. There's always a choice. You could have stayed back east, found work in a factory, maybe married some shopkeeper. She thought of the whispers that followed her through every town, the doors that closed in her face, the respectable men who saw her as fair game once word got out about James Fletcher. No, she said simply. I couldn't have. Understanding flickered in his eyes. He pulled out a chair, gestured for her to sit. She did, suddenly exhausted. My brother built this place from nothing, he said. Came out here with big dreams. Was going to raise cattle, get rich, bring his family out to live like royalty. His mouth twisted. Instead, he barely scraped by. Lost most of his herd to drought. Lost his wife. Then the pneumonia got him. Why did you stay take on his children, his ranch? Someone had to. He shifted, and she caught the flash of pain across his features. I wasn't much use for anything else after. His hand went unconsciously to his scarred throat. After the war. The war. That explained the limp, the scar, the way he moved like a man expecting attack. How many broken soldiers had she seen, trying to find their place in a world that had moved on without them? We all have our ghosts, she said softly. That we do. He stood, the chair scraping against the floor. Lock the door behind me. Keep the poker by your bedroll. Wade's not the only one here who might get ideas. Will they respect your warning? They'll respect my gun. He paused at the door. You're doing better with the cooking. The men are complaining less. It was faint praise, but she held on to it like a gift. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Winter's coming, and that's when this place shows its teeth. You might be begging for that wagon to Lattimore's before the first snow falls. But as she barred the door behind him and settled onto her makeshift bed, Temperance found herself thinking not of escape, but of small girls with corn silk hair and wounded dolls, of a man who'd taken in his brother's children when he could barely care for himself, of the way he'd stood in that doorway, ready to protect her without hesitation. She pressed her mother's skillet against her chest, feeling its familiar weight. I will not break, she whispered to the darkness. I will not run. I will earn my place here, one burnt biscuit at a time. Outside, a coyote howled at the rising moon. The sound should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like a welcome, wild and raw and honest, like everything else in this unforgiving place. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. Wade would nurse his grudge. The work would be just as hard. But tonight, she'd mended a doll and made 2 little girls smile. She'd stood her ground against a bully and found an unexpected protector. It wasn't much, but like Asa said, someone had to do it. Someone had to stay. 3 weeks passed, and the rhythm of ranch life began to feel less foreign. Temperance learned to anticipate the stove's tantrums, to gauge portions that would satisfy work-hardened appetites, to brew coffee strong enough to wake the dead but smooth enough to drink. Her biscuits no longer resembled rocks, and even Wade grudgingly admitted her stew was tolerable. The men still watched her with varying degrees of suspicion and speculation. But they ate what she cooked and kept their distance, all except Tom Morrison, the youngest hand at barely 18, who blushed crimson whenever she served his plate. Getting cold at night, he stammered one evening, hat twisted in his hands. Thought you might need extra firewood. She accepted his offering with grave thanks, pretending not to notice how he fled the moment the wood was stacked. Such innocent admiration was a balm after months of cruel whispers and knowing leers. October arrived with frost on the windows and ice in the wash bucket. She rose earlier now, fingers numb as she coaxed the stove to life. The kitchen became her domain, and she guarded it fiercely, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed, organizing supplies with military precision, mending the gaps in the walls with flour paste and determination. Place hasn't looked this good since my ma was alive, Asa observed one morning, running a finger along a spotless shelf. She was kneading bread, the rhythm soothing as prayer. A clean kitchen is a productive kitchen. My mother always said that. Wise woman. He poured himself coffee, then surprised her by pouring a second cup. Sit, that dough won't run away. She hesitated, then dried her hands and accepted the cup. They sat in companionable silence, watching dawn paint the mountains pink and gold. Letter came yesterday, he said finally. From Lattimore. He hired a cook 2 weeks ago, some widow from Denver. The words hit her like cold water. She'd known this was temporary, but somehow the days had lulled her into forgetting. I see. Her voice came out steady, though her hands trembled around the cup. When would you like me to leave? I wouldn't. He studied his coffee as if it held answers. Job's yours if you want it. Same wages I'd pay any hand. Room and board included. The men won't like it. The men will adjust. They've been eating better these past weeks than in the previous year combined. He paused. The girls need you too. Annie started talking yesterday. Just a few words, but it's progress. She thought of Annie's small voice asking for more milk. The way Lydia now sought her out each evening for sewing lessons and stories. Thought too of this man who'd offered her shelter when he had every reason to turn her away. I'll stay, she said, through winter, at least. Good. He stood, matter of fact, as if they'd discussed nothing more significant than the weather. Best get that bread in the oven. The boys get cranky when breakfast is late. She returned to her kneading with renewed vigor, humming under her breath. The tune was one her mother used to sing, about home being where you make it. For the first time in months, the words felt true. That afternoon, while the men were out checking fence lines, she was surprised by hoofbeats in the yard. A rider approached well-dressed, clean-shaven, everything the McGraw hands were not. He dismounted with practiced ease, touching his hat brim. Afternoon, Miss. Would Mr. McGrath be about? He's out with the men, expected back by supper. I'll wait, if that's acceptable. He smiled, teeth white and even. Paul Hutchinson. I represent certain interests in Cheyenne. Something about his smooth manner set her nerves on edge, but hospitality demanded she offer refreshment. There's coffee, Mr. Hutchinson, and fresh bread. How delightful. He followed her inside, eyes taking in every detail. You must be the cook I've heard about. Word travels even to Cheyenne about McGraw's unexpected addition. The way he said it made her skin crawl. She busied herself with the coffee, aware of his gaze following her movements. Temperance. Isn't it unusual name? He accepted the cup, fingers brushing hers longer than necessary. Must be challenging, maintaining virtue in such rough surroundings. I manage well enough. I'm sure you do. His smile turned knowing. Though I wonder if you're aware of your employer's full situation. The debts, for instance, the loans coming due. A woman should know if her position is secure. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Lydia ran in, face flushed with cold and excitement. Miss Temperance? I found the prettiest rocks by the creek. She stopped, seeing the stranger. Oh. And who's this angel? Hutchinson's voice dripped honey. Lydia, go find your sister, Temperance said quickly. Check if the hens have laid. The child went reluctantly, casting suspicious glances at the visitor. Smart girl. Charming, Hutchinson murmured. McGray's nieces. I believe tragic about their parents. One wonders what will become of them if the ranch fails. The ranch isn't failing. Isn't it? He pulled out a leather portfolio, spreading papers on her clean table. 3 missed payments. Cattle prices falling. Winter coming with insufficient feed stored. A businessman would cut his losses. She stared at the figures, heart sinking. The numbers were damning debts that would crush most men, interest accumulating like snow in a blizzard. "What do you want, Mr. Hutchinson?" To help, of course, my associates could make this all disappear. The debts, the worry, the uncertainty. All McGray needs to do is sell. We're prepared to be generous enough to start fresh somewhere else. Enough to provide properly for those little girls. And if he refuses, his smile never wavered, then winter will be very hard indeed. For all of you. The sound of horses interrupted whatever threat he might have added. Asa entered first, taking in the scene with one sharp glance, Hutchinson's predatory smile. The papers spread like a trap. Temperance's pale face. "Hutchinson." No greeting, just the flat statement of a name. "McGrath, I was just explaining your situation to your charming cook." "Get out." "Now, let's be civilized." "Get out before I forget my manners entirely." Asa's hand rested on his pistol. "And take your papers with you." Hutchinson gathered his documents unhurriedly. "The offer stands, though not for long. Winter has a way of clarifying priorities." He touched his hat to Temperance, the gesture somehow making her feel dirty, and strolled out. They heard him mount and ride away, hoofbeats fading into distance. Asa sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than his years. "What did he tell you?" "The truth, apparently, about the debts. My brother was a dreamer. Borrowed heavy to expand the herd, improve the buildings. Then the market crashed." He rubbed his face. "I've been holding them off, but—" "How bad is it?" "Bad enough." He looked at her then, something raw in his eyes. "You should reconsider that position at Lattimore's. Take the girls with you. He'd hire you in a heartbeat if you came with built-in nursemaids." The suggestion hit her like a slap. "You'd send your nieces away?" "To safety, to 3 meals a day and warm beds and a future that doesn't involve watching this place bleed us dry. Yes." She thought of Hutchinson's oily smile, his veiled threats, thought of Lydia's laughter and Annie's tentative words, of this man who'd protected her, given her a chance when no one else would. "No. Be sensible." "No." She stood, hands flat on the table. "You don't abandon family. Not for money, not for safety, not for anything. We'll find another way." "We," his voice held wonder. "There is no we, Temperance. You're hired help." The words stung, but she recognized the defense mechanism. Push people away before they could leave on their own. "I'm whatever I choose to be," she said firmly, "and I choose to stay, to help, to be part of this, whatever comes." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. "You'll regret it." "Maybe, but that's my choice to make." That night, she found him sitting on the porch despite the cold, staring out at the stars. She brought coffee laced with the last of her precious hoard of sugar. "My mother used to say the stars look different out west," she offered, settling beside him. "Bigger, closer." "Like you could reach up and grab them." He accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "I used to think that before I learned that reaching too high just means a longer fall. Or maybe it means you learn to fly." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You're an optimist." "I'm a survivor. There's a difference." She pulled her shawl tighter. "We both are. I think—" They sat in silence, shoulders not quite touching, watching their breath cloud in the cold air. Somewhere in the darkness, a night bird called lonely but defiant, claiming its place in the vast emptiness. "That letter," she said eventually, "the one I got last week, it was from my father." She felt him stiffen beside her, but he didn't speak. "Disowning me, formally. Said I was no daughter of his, that I'd brought shame on the family name." The words came easier than expected. "As if I hadn't figured that out when he refused to let me come home after James abandoned me." "Fathers can be fools." His voice was rough. "Throwing away what they should treasure." He wasn't wrong, though. I did shame them. Trusted the wrong man. Believed pretty lies. She laughed, bitter as the coffee dregs. The respectable girl who ran off with a married man. That's all I'll ever be to most people. You're more than that here. The simple statement undid her. Tears came then, silent but unstoppable. He didn't try to comfort her, didn't move away, just sat there, solid as the mountains, while she wept for everything she'd lost and might never have. When the tears finally stopped, she wiped her face with cold fingers. I should go in early morning tomorrow. Temperance! Her name on his lips stopped her. That letter. Burn it. Some words don't deserve to be kept. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and fled inside, but later, feeding her father's cruel words to the kitchen fire, she found herself thinking not of the past but of the future, of fighting for this place, these people, this unexpected home. The flames consumed the paper quickly, reducing her father's condemnation to ash. She scraped it into the waste bucket with the rest of the debris, then set about preparing dough for tomorrow's bread. She had work to do. The last snow of winter came late, when everyone thought spring had finally won its battle. By noon, the white blanket was melting into muddy streams that turned the ranch yard into a treacherous bog. Temperance watched from the kitchen window as Lydia and Annie played near the swollen creek, their laughter carrying on the wind. Stay back from the water, she called through the open door. It's running fast today. We're being careful, Lydia shouted back, but careful and 7-year-olds rarely kept company long. Temperance returned to her bread-making, flour dusting her arms to the elbows. 6 months at McGraw Ranch had transformed her. Her hands were strong now, her movements in the kitchen efficient and sure. The men no longer commented on her presence, just filled their plates and grunted their thanks. Even Wade had settled into a wary truce, though she still kept the poker within reach at night. A scream shattered the peaceful afternoon. She ran without thinking, bursting through the door to see Lydia standing on the creek bank, pointing at the churning water. Annie fell. She was reaching for a pretty rock, and the creek had transformed into a monster, fed by snowmelt from the mountains. Temperance could see Annie's yellow hair disappearing around a bend, her small hands grasping desperately at branches that broke in her grip. No time to call for help. The men were out with the herd. Asa was in town for supplies. There was only her. She plunged into the water, gasping as the cold struck like a physical blow. The current immediately grabbed her skirts, trying to drag her down. She fought forward, using rocks and roots to pull herself along. Annie, the water filled her mouth, tasted of mud and winter. Grab something and hold on. Around the bend, she spotted the child wedged against a fallen log, the water pouring over her head. A few more seconds and she'd be swept away entirely. Temperance half swam, half clawed her way forward, lungs burning. Her fingers closed on Annie's dress just as the log shifted. They both went under, the world becoming a chaos of brown water and crushing pressure. Temperance's foot found a rock, and she pushed off hard, breaking the surface with Annie clutched against her chest. The bank seemed impossibly far. Her waterlogged skirts were anchors, her strength failing. Annie wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. Terror gave her one last surge of energy. She grabbed an overhanging root, hauling them both partially out of the current. Help! The word came out as barely a whisper. Someone help us! Lydia appeared on the bank above, face white with terror. I'll get help, hold on. Time blurred. The cold was everywhere, in her bones, in her blood. Her hands were going numb, losing their grip. Annie's weight seemed to double with each second. Don't you dare! She gasped to the unconscious child. Don't you dare leave us! She pressed Annie against the bank, tilting her head back. Water poured from the small mouth. Temperance struck her between the shoulder blades once, twice. Nothing. Please, she begged any power that might be listening. Please. On the third strike, Annie coughed, water and mud spewed out. And then she was crying the most beautiful sound Temperance had ever heard.
Hoofbeats thundered above. Asa's voice, sharp with fear. "Rope! Get me a rope!"
Everything after that came in fragments, strong hands pulling them up, Asa's coat wrapping around her, Annie crying in his arms, the jolting ride back to the house, blankets and fire and blessed warmth. She woke to lamplight and the smell of coffee. Every muscle ached. Her throat felt scraped raw. When she tried to sit up, gentle hands pressed her back down. "Rest," Asa's voice, closer than expected. "You've been asleep for 10 hours. Her eyes focused on his face. He looked haggard, older, as if he'd aged years in a day. "Annie, sleeping by the fire. She'll be fine, thanks to you." He helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her. "Lydia, too. She hasn't left your side except when I carried her to bed." Temperance became aware of her surroundings. She was in a bed, a real bed, not her usual pallet by the kitchen fire. The room was sparse but clean, with curtains at the window and a rag rug on the floor. "This is your room," she said, recognizing the few personal items. "Was the warmest. You were ice cold for hours, burning with fever after." He poured water from a pitcher, helped her drink. "Thought we might lose you." "It takes more than a little water to kill a Hartwell." The joke fell flat between them. "Don't," his voice was rough, "don't make light of it. When Lydia came running, saying you were both in the creek," he stopped, jaw working. She'd never seen him undone like this. Asa McGraw, who faced down drunk cowboys and predatory businessmen without flinching, looked shaken to his core. "I couldn't let her drown," she said simply.
"You could have died. Should have died. That current—"
He stood abruptly, pacing to the window.
"Why?"
"You know why. They're not your children, not your responsibility." "Aren't they?" She pushed herself more upright, ignoring the room's tendency to spin. "I've been here 6 months. I've braided their hair and mended their clothes and dried their tears. I've taught them letters and numbers and which berries are safe to eat. If that doesn't make them mine in every way that matters, then I don't understand family at all." He turned to face her, and she saw something raw in his expression. "You have no idea what you're risking." "Don't I? I've already lost everything, once my reputation, my home, my family. I survived." She met his gaze steadily. "Some things are worth the risk." A knock interrupted whatever he might have said. Tom Morrison peered around the door, hat in hand. "Sorry to interrupt, boss. Miss Temperance, just wanted to say that was the bravest thing I ever saw. We're all grateful." He ducked his head. "Made you something." He produced a wooden cross, crudely carved but heartfelt. "Thought you might like it, for protection." Tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you, Tom. It's beautiful." The young man fled, red-faced. Asa watched him go with something like amusement. "Boys half in love with you. Most of them are, in their way. They respect strength, that's all." "Is it?" He returned to the chair beside the bed. "Even Wade's been subdued. Found him teaching Annie knots earlier. Said a girl should know how to secure things properly." They sat in comfortable silence. Through the wall, she could hear the normal sounds of evening men returning from work, boots on floorboards, the clink of tin plates. "I should get up," she said. "They'll need supper. Tom's handling it. Boy can't cook worth beans, but he's trying." Asa's mouth quirked. "Made soup, mostly water, but the thought's there. The kitchen. We'll survive one night without you." His expression grew serious. "You need to know something. While I was in town, I heard news. Paul Hutchinson's been buying up properties all along the creek, forcing sales through whatever means necessary." "He wants the water rights," she guessed. "Control the water, control the valley." Smart woman. He leaned back, exhaustion evident in every line. He'll come harder now. Spring means cattle drives, money flowing. He'll want us gone before that happens. Then we'll have to disappoint him. We again. He shook his head. You nearly died today for this place. Nobody would blame you for leaving. Would you leave if positions were reversed? That's different. Why? Because you're a man. Because it's your family name on the deed. She struggled to sit straighter, ignoring the room's spin. I've bled for this ranch same as you. Frozen for it. Worked myself raw for it. Those girls call me Aunt Temperance when they think I'm not listening. This is my home now. My fight. He studied her for a long moment. Then, moving with careful deliberation, he reached out and took her hand. His fingers were calloused, warm, infinitely gentle. When I saw you in that water, he said quietly. When I thought, he stopped, tried again. I have lost everyone who mattered. Parents, brother, friends in the war. Told myself it was better not to let anyone close again. Asa, let me finish. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You changed that, changed everything. Made this place feel like more than a grave I was tending. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I have no right to ask anything of you. I'm a broken-down soldier with debts I can't pay and enemies circling like wolves. But if you're determined to stay, I am. Then stay as more than the cook. The words hung between them, fragile as spring ice. I know what people say about you, about your past. I don't care. You're the finest woman I've ever known, and I'd be proud honored to face whatever comes with you beside me. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What exactly are you asking? I'm asking if you could see a future here, with me, with the girls. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not much for pretty words, but I'd spend every day trying to deserve you. The tears came then, but they were different from all the tears before. These were warm, healing, full of possibility. You saved me, she whispered. That first night, you could have sent me away, but you gave me a chance, a purpose, a home. So is that a yes? Ask me again when I'm not half drowned and fevered, when your ranch isn't in danger and creditors aren't circling. She turned her hand in his, interlacing their fingers. Ask me when the only reason is because you want me to stay. I'll ask you every day if needed. He lifted their joined hands, pressed his lips to her knuckles. Rest now. Tomorrow brings its own battles. He stayed there as she drifted back to sleep, her hand in his, standing guard against whatever darkness might come. Through the window, stars began to appear, still vast, still distant, but somehow no longer out of reach. Spring surrendered to summer with reluctance, bringing days of scorching heat that baked the earth to hardpan. The creek that had nearly claimed Annie's life dwindled to a trickle, then disappeared entirely. Each morning, Temperance watched Asa's face grow more grim as he studied the cloudless sky. Never seen it this dry, Tom Morrison said, dumping another bucket of muddy water from the well. Even the old-timers are worried. Temperance strained the water through cheesecloth, trying to remove the worst of the silt. Everything tasted of dust now, the food, the air, even their dreams. She'd taken to giving the girls tiny portions of water, telling them stories to distract from their thirst. We'll make do, she said, as she said every day. But the words rang hollow when the cattle began to drop. They found the first dead steer by the north pasture, ribs showing through hide gone tight as drum skin. Within a week, they were dragging carcasses to the boneyard daily. The ranch account books, already bleeding red ink, became a funeral ledger. Let me help, Temperance said one evening, finding Asa slumped over his desk. I kept books for my father's store before. She stopped, unwilling to resurrect that ghost. He pushed the ledger toward her without comment. The numbers were worse than she'd imagined. Even if rain came tomorrow, even if every remaining cow survived, they couldn't meet the next payment to Hutchinson's bank. We could sell some land, she suggested, The north section, already mortgaged, all of it. He rubbed his face, looking older than his years. Maybe Hutchinson's right. Maybe I'm just postponing the inevitable. Don't. She closed the ledger firmly. We're not giving up. There has to be another way. But what way she'd pawned her mother's few pieces of jewelry months ago for feed. The larder grew emptier each day, their meals increasingly creative combinations of cornmeal and whatever wild greens she could find. The girls never complained, but she saw how they looked at their plates, trying to make each bite last. Wade's grumbling grew louder with each passing day. "Man can't work on dust and promises," he announced one morning, pushing away his meager breakfast. "Hutchinson's hiring, paying real wages." "Then go," Asa said quietly. "Nobody's keeping you." Wade stood, but hesitated. Despite everything, the ranch had been home for years. "What about you boys, Tom, Frank? We stick around here, we'll be burying each other come winter." Tom Morrison squared his young shoulders. "I'm staying. Miss Temperance saved Annie. That means something." Frank nodded slowly. "Reckon I've got nowhere better to be." Wade spat in the dust. "Fools! Don't come crying to me when your bellies are empty and your pockets are emptier." But he didn't leave. Not yet. That afternoon, Temperance was teaching the girls arithmetic with pebbles when she heard horses approaching. Many horses. She moved to the window, dread pooling in her stomach. Paul Hutchinson rode at the head of a dozen men, all armed, all wearing the satisfied expressions of hunters who'd cornered their prey. Behind them rolled a wagon loaded with lumber and surveying equipment. "Girls, go to your room," she said calmly. "Practice your letters." But Aunt Temperance, "Now." They scurried away as Asa emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. The ranch hands materialized from various corners, forming a loose line behind him. Temperance grabbed her shawl and the heavy rolling pin, not much of a weapon, but its weight felt reassuring. "Gentlemen," Hutchinson said, not bothering to dismount. "Lovely day for business." "State your business and leave." Asa replied, "Oh, I intend to." Hutchinson produced a sheaf of papers. "Foreclosure notice. You're 3 months behind on payments. According to territorial law, that gives me the right to claim the property immediately. The contract allows for 6 months. In normal circumstances, but these aren't normal circumstances, are they?" Hutchinson's smile was sharp as a blade. "Drought conditions activate the acceleration clause? Surely you read the fine print." Asa's knuckles went white on the rifle stock. "You changed the terms." "I used the terms available, business, McGraw, nothing personal." He gestured to his men. "We'll be surveying for the new operations. I'd appreciate if your people stayed out of our way." "You're not taking anything today," Asa said. "Get off my land." "Your land," Hutchinson laughed. "Look around. McGraw, dead cattle, dry wells, a handful of broken-down cowboys, and a soiled woman playing house. You've got nothing left to fight with." The words hit like physical blows. Temperance saw Asa's finger move to the trigger and stepped forward quickly. "You're right, Mr. Hutchinson," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "We don't have much, but we have something you'll never understand. Oh, enlighten me. Miss Hartwell, or should I say, the former Miss Fletcher's woman." The old shame tried to rise, but she pushed it down. "We have each other. We have loyalty. We have the knowledge that every meal we've shared, every sunrise we've watched, every small triumph and large defeat, all of it was honest. Can you say the same?" "Touching, but sentiment doesn't pay debts." "No, but it does make us dangerous." She met his gaze steadily. "A man with nothing left to lose might do anything. Burn surveying equipment, poison water holes. Make sure that even if you take this land, it's worthless to you." Hutchinson's eyes narrowed. "You're threatening me." "I'm explaining consequences. You want a profitable ranch? Leave us be. You want scorched earth? Keep pushing." For a long moment, Nobody moved. The sun beat down mercilessly, and somewhere a crow called harsh and mocking. Temperance kept her expression calm, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Finally, Hutchinson wheeled his horse around. "You have 2 weeks. Get current on the payments or get out. And if one board of my property is damaged, I'll see you all hanged for it." They watched the riders disappear in a cloud of dust. Only when they were gone did Temperance realize she was shaking. "Scorched earth," Asa said quietly. "You'd do that. To protect the girls, this place you." She looked at him straight. "Yes." Something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to admiration and perhaps something deeper. "You meant it, every word." "I don't make idle threats." That night, unable to sleep, she stood on the porch watching heat lightning flicker across the horizon, false promise of rain that would never come. Behind her, the door opened and Asa joined her, moving with his characteristic uneven gait. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. Thinking. He stood close enough that she could feel his warmth. "About what you said, about having each other. It's true, isn't it? Wade could leave tomorrow, but he's still here. Tom and Frank too. Even the girls understand that we're fighting for more than buildings and cattle." "And you?" His voice was soft. "What are you fighting for?" She turned to face him. In the intermittent lightning, his face was a map of hard years and harder choices, but his eyes held something she'd rarely seen: hope. Fragile but real. "You know what?" she said simply. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle it made her throat tight. "I've been a fool," he said. "Waiting for perfect moments that don't exist out here. Waiting to have something to offer besides debt and drought. Asa, let me say this." His hand cupped her cheek. "That first morning, when you stood in our kitchen covered in mud and defiance, holding that skillet like a shield, I think I knew even then you were going to change everything." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Lost and alone and sure you'd throw me back into the storm. Instead, you became the storm. Shook us all awake." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I'm not a man of pretty words, Temperance, but I need you to know, however this ends. Whether we lose the ranch tomorrow or somehow survive, I'm glad you're here. Grateful down to my bones." The lightning flickered again, and in its brief illumination, she saw everything she needed in his face, rising on her toes. She kissed him soft at first, then with all the fierce hope that had carried her through flood and drought and every trial between. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, she saw his rare smile. "Was that a yes?" he asked. "To the question I asked before." "Ask me again in 2 weeks, she said, "when we've saved this place." "You sound certain we will." "I am." She took his hand, scarred and strong. "We've survived everything else. What's one more impossible thing?" They stood together watching the barren sky, hands linked, while around them the ranch slept. In her pocket, the letter she'd meant to burn, but kept her father's cruel words of abandonment, seemed to weigh less than before. She'd found her own family now, built from courage and choice rather than blood. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight she had the solid presence of a good man beside her, the memory of 2 girls calling her aunt, the loyalty of rough men who stayed when leaving would be easier. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The fire started just after midnight, when the ranch lay wrapped in exhausted sleep. Temperance woke to the acrid smell of smoke and the terrified screaming of horses. She bolted upright, momentarily disoriented in the darkness. "Fire!" Tom Morrison's voice cracked with panic. "The barn's burning!" She threw on her shawl and ran barefoot into the yard. The barn was already half consumed, flames leaping toward the star-filled sky like desperate prayers. The horses trapped inside kicked at their stalls, their screams cutting through the roar of the fire. Asa was already there, shirt hastily pulled on, directing the men. "Tom, Frank, get the water buckets, Wade. Help me with the horses." Without thinking, Temperance grabbed a bucket and joined the feudal bucket brigade. The well was nearly dry. Each bucket brought up more mud than water. The heat pressed against them like a living thing, stealing breath and thought.
"It's no use," Wade shouted. "Let it burn."
"Those horses will die." Asa headed for the barn entrance. "Then they die better than you burning with them." But Asa was already gone. Swallowed by smoke and flame, Temperance's heart seized. She dropped her bucket and started forward, but strong hands held her back. "You can't help him," Frank said. "He knows what he's doing." The seconds stretched like hours. A section of roof collapsed, sending up a shower of sparks. The girls appeared on the porch, Annie crying, Lydia white-faced and silent. Then, movement in the smoke. Asa emerged, leading 2 horses, their eyes rolling white with terror. He shoved their lead ropes at Tom and plunged back inside. "Damn fool," Wade muttered, but he positioned himself at the entrance, ready to grab whatever Asa brought out. 3 more times Asa entered that inferno. 3 more times he emerged with terrified animals. On his final exit, his shirt was charred, his face blackened, burns visible on his arms. He collapsed to his knees in the dirt, coughing. Temperance broke free from Frank's grip and ran to him. "Let me see." "The horses are safe. Let me see." She examined his burns by the hellish light of the dying barn. 2nd degree on his arms, singed hair, smoke-damaged lungs. But he'd live. "You incredible fool." "Couldn't let them burn." Each word came between painful coughs. "Not the horses' fault we're failing?" The barn collapsed entirely then, sending a pillar of flame and smoke into the night. They watched their winter hay supplies. Their tack, their tools, everything burned to ash. "Well," Wade said finally, "that's that then. No hay, no barn. Might as well hand Hutchinson the keys now." "Shut up, Wade," Tom said tiredly. But Wade was past caring. "No, I'm done being quiet, done pretending this ain't over. Look around. We're finished." He turned on Asa. "And you nearly killed yourself for what horses we can't feed, pride we can't afford." "That's enough," Temperance said. "Is it you think playing nursemaid makes you one of us?" Wade's face twisted ugly in the firelight. "You're just another mouth to feed, another problem he don't need. If he had any sense, he'd have shipped you back to wherever whores go when—" The sound of the slap echoed across the yard. Wade staggered back, hand to his reddening cheek, staring at Temperance in shock. "I said that's enough." Her voice was steady, despite her shaking hands. "You want to leave. You want to wallow in self-pity. Do it elsewhere, but you will not speak to him that way, not after what he just risked." Wade's hand went to his gun. The other men tensed, even through his pain. Asa tried to rise. "Go ahead," Temperance said. "Shoot an unarmed woman. Add that to your list of accomplishments." For a moment, violence hung in the air thick as smoke. Then Wade's hand fell away from his weapon. "I'm done," he said. "Done with all of it. This place can rot." He stalked toward the bunkhouse, presumably to gather his things. "Let him go." Asa wheezed when Tom started to follow. "Man makes his choices." Temperance helped Asa to the house, settling him in a chair while she prepared burn salve from her dwindling medical supplies. The girls hovered anxiously until she gave them tasks, Annie to fetch clean water, Lydia to tear cloth for bandages. "That was foolish," she said quietly, spreading salve on the worst burns. "Brave, but foolish." Couldn't stand there screaming. He winced as she wrapped his arms. "Reminded me too much of—" He stopped. "Of the war." He nodded once, sharp. "Burning supply wagons, cavalry horses caught in the flames. Some sounds you never forget." She worked in silence, gentle with his wounds. Through the window, they could see the barn's remains still glowing, their last hope literally turned to smoke. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly.
For all of it. For bringing you into this failure. For not being the man you deserve.
Stop! She framed his soot-stained face with her hands. You're exactly the man I deserve. The man I choose.
I've got nothing left to offer. The ranch is gone. We both know it.
You have yourself. That's all I ever wanted. He caught her hands, pressing them against his chest where his heart beat steady despite everything.
How can that be enough?
Because I love you. The words came simple and true. Because the girls love you. Because you ran into a burning building to save horses that another man would have written off as losses. Love doesn't pay debts. No, but it makes bearing them possible. She kissed his forehead, tasting smoke and sweat. We have 10 days left. Let's use them. Dawn came pale and unforgiving, revealing the full devastation. The barn was a skeleton of blackened beams. 3 horses hadn't made it out. They'd found the bodies in the far stalls. The rest stood in the corral, traumatized but alive. Wade was gone, his bunk stripped bare, but the others remained, moving slowly through the morning chores. Tom brought Temperance wildflowers with her breakfast tray, scraggly things, but she placed them in a cup like they were roses. For courage, he said, blushing.
Ma'am?
Frank organized the salvageable items from around the barn's perimeter. Not much, some tools with only the handles burned, a few bags of grain stored in the lean-to, but he stacked them neatly, as if order could combat chaos. Even Paul Hutchinson's spy they all knew Wade had been reporting to him was gone. They were alone now. The heart of the ranch reduced to its essence, a damaged man, a determined woman, 2 orphaned girls, and a couple of cowboys too stubborn or loyal to quit.
We need to send the girls away.
Asa said that evening. He sat stiffly, burns making every movement painful.
Before Hutchinson comes, they shouldn't see what happens next.
No. Lydia stood in the doorway, Annie behind her. We're not leaving. This isn't a discussion, young lady. Yes, it is. Lydia's chin jutted out, so like her father's stubborn expression. This is our home, our family. We stay together. She's right, Temperance said quietly. Splitting up won't save us, but staying together might. Asa looked between them, his brother's daughters. The woman he loved, and she saw the moment he stopped fighting. His shoulders dropped, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked defeated. Then we face the end together, he said.
No.
Temperance stood, fire in her eyes. We face the beginning. Tomorrow, we start rebuilding. Not the barn that can wait, but the ranch, ourselves, our hope. With what? His gesture encompassed the devastation. We have nothing. We have everything that matters. She looked at each of them in turn, and that's enough to start. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, probably another false promise. But Temperance chose to hear it as agreement, as possibility, as the first note of a song not yet written.
10 days, it wasn't much.
But empires had fallen in less time, and miracles, she'd learned, often came disguised as disasters. The barn fire had taken so much, but in the ashes, something new was already stirring. She could feel it in the way the girls pressed close to Asa's chair, careful of his bandages, in the way Tom and Frank exchanged glances and nodded. Some silent agreement reached, in the way Asa's hand found hers and held on like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. They'd meant to break them, whoever set that fire. Instead, they'd forged them into something harder, stronger, unbreakable as the cast-iron skillet that had started this journey. Let Hutchinson come, they'd be ready. The dawn came blood-red on the 10th day, painting the mountains like a portent of violence. Temperance stood at the kitchen window, watching the horizon while her hands mechanically kneaded the last of their flour into biscuits. Behind her, the house stirred with quiet activity, everyone preparing for what felt like a last stand. They're coming, Tom Morrison called from his lookout position. Dozen riders, maybe more, and wagons. Temperance dried her hands. checked the load in the shotgun Asa had taught her to use, and stepped onto the porch. The girls were already in the root cellar with strict instructions to stay hidden no matter what they heard. She'd kissed them both, promised to come for them when it was safe, and tried not to think about what would happen if she couldn't keep that promise. Asa emerged from the house, moving stiffly from his burns but carrying his rifle with steady hands. Frank took position by the well. Tom stayed on the roof, young eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Remember," Asa said quietly, "we're not looking to kill anyone, just to make the cost of taking this place higher than Hutchinson wants to pay." "And if he's willing to pay it?" Frank asked. "Then we make him pay dear." The riders came in a cloud of dust. Hutchinson at the lead with Wade beside him, the betrayal complete. Behind them rode hard men with harder faces, guns visible, intentions clear. The wagons carried lumber and supplies, as if they planned to start building the moment the current occupants were cleared away. McGray Hutchinson called out, reining up just outside rifle range. "I've brought the sheriff to ensure this transition happens legally. No need for unpleasantness." A man with a tin star rode forward, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. McGraw, I've got papers here. Legal foreclosure. I'm bound by law to enforce them." "Those papers are based on lies and manipulated contracts," Asa replied. "You know it as well as I do. Sheriff Daniels." The sheriff shifted in his saddle. "What I know and what I can prove are different things. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Hard." Temperance stepped forward, shotgun cradled in her arms like her mother's skillet once was. "You want to talk about hard is burying your family and starting over with nothing. Hard is watching children go hungry while rich men play games with their lives. Hard is standing up when everyone tells you to lie down and die quietly." "Miss Hartwell," Hutchinson said with false courtesy, "this doesn't concern you. You're not family, not even properly." "She's my wife." The words rang across the yard like a shot. Temperance turned to stare at Asa, who met her gaze steadily. "We were married 3 days ago." He continued, "Judge Morrison in town can confirm it. That makes her family. That makes her a legal owner of this property. And that means you'll have to go through both of us." It was a lie, of course, but she saw the uncertainty flicker across the sheriff's face, the way Hutchinson's jaw tightened. In territorial law, a wife's claims could complicate foreclosure proceedings significantly. "That's a pretty story," Wade spat. "But it won't change nothing. You're outgunned and out of options." "Are we?" Frank stood up from behind the well, revealing the rifle he'd kept hidden. On the roof, Tom did the same. From the windows of the house, more gun barrels appeared, just sticks and shadows, cleverly arranged. But from a distance they looked real enough. "You want a war?" Asa asked calmly. "We'll give you one. How many of your hired guns are willing to die for Hutchinson's profit? How many widows do you want to make today? Sheriff?" The moment stretched taut as wire. Temperance could hear her heartbeat, could feel sweat trickling down her spine despite the morning chill. Her finger rested on the shotgun trigger. Ready. Then, from behind Hutchinson's group, came the sound of more horses. Lots of them. "What the hell?" Wade turned in his saddle. Over the rise came riders 20, 30, maybe more. At their head rode Judge Morrison himself, along with several prominent townsmen. But most surprising were the women wives from town, farmers' daughters, even the preacher's wife, all armed with whatever they could carry. "Thought you might need some help." The judge called out. Word spread about what's happening here. Folks decided they'd had enough of Hutchinson's tactics. "This is illegal assembly," Hutchinson sputtered. "Sheriff, arrest them." Sheriff Daniels looked at the growing crowd, his neighbors, his friends, people who'd vote in the next election, and slowly shook his head. "Don't see any laws being broken. Just folks out for a morning ride." "You work for me," Hutchinson snarled. "No, sir, I work for the county, and the county's speaking pretty clear right now." More riders appeared. Temperance recognized the baker who'd refused her service months ago, the seamstress who'd crossed the street to avoid her. Now they sat straight-backed on horses and wagons, faces set with determination. "Miss Temperance saved my nephew," a woman called out. "When he took fever last month, she came in the night, brought medicine, stayed till it broke. Didn't ask for nothing. She taught my girl her letters," another added. "Said every child deserved to read, no matter how poor." "When our well went dry, McGray sent water. A farmer said, even though his own was running low, that's neighbor helping neighbor. That's what we're here for." Temperance hadn't even remembered some of these kindnesses, small things done in passing. Barely worth noting. But they'd been noted, remembered, treasured. "This changes nothing." Hutchinson's face had gone purple. "I have legal documents, and I have a telegram," Judge Morrison said, producing a paper. "From the territorial governor. Seems he's very interested in your land dealings. Mr. Hutchinson, something about fraudulent contracts and forged signatures. Federal marshals are on their way." The silence was deafening. Wade had gone pale, realizing he'd tied himself to a sinking ship. Several of Hutchinson's hired guns were already edging their horses backward.
"You planned this,"
Hutchinson said, staring at Asa.
"You knew they were coming."
"I knew people were tired of being pushed around," Asa replied. "I knew eventually someone would push back. Just happened to be today." "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Temperance stepped forward, shotgun still ready. "You're done here. Done threatening families. Done stealing dreams. Done poisoning wells and burning barns. You can't prove I had anything to do with... Wade can..." She looked at the cowboy who'd made her life miserable for months. "Can't you... Wade, that's why you're here to tie up loose ends. Were you the loose end? Or was he..." Wade's hand twitched toward his gun, then fell away as he realized how many weapons were trained on him. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You helped him poison our well water, set the barn fire, all for what, 30 pieces of silver? Lying witch? Am I? Then why did you smell like kerosene that night? Why were your boots covered in ash before the alarm was raised?" She'd noticed, filed it away, waited for the right moment. "You want to hang alone for arson and attempted murder, or you want to tell the truth?" Wade looked between Hutchinson and the crowd, calculating odds that weren't in his favor. Self-preservation won. "He paid me," Wade said quickly. "Paid me to report on the ranch. Cause problems. The fire was supposed to be empty, just destroy the hay. I didn't know the horses were locked in." "You son of a..." Hutchinson went for his gun. 3 shots rang out simultaneously. Hutchinson's pistol flew from his hand. He clutched his wrist, blood seeping between his fingers. Tom Morrison on the roof, young face grim, lowered his smoking rifle. "Good shot, boy," someone called out appreciatively. Sheriff Daniels finally found his authority. "Paul Hutchinson, Wade Harker, you're under arrest for arson, destruction of property, and conspiracy to defraud. Rest of you hired guns ride out now and keep riding, or join them." The hired men didn't need to be told twice. Within minutes, only the sheriff, his new prisoners, and the crowd of neighbors remained. "Asa," Judge Morrison said, "about that marriage certificate, we should probably make it official, don't you think?" Asa turned to Temperance, a question in his storm-gray eyes. She saw everything there: hope, fear, love, possibility. The future stretching out before them wouldn't be easy. The ranch was still struggling, the debt still real, the work still hard. But they wouldn't face it alone. "Yes," she said simply. "Let's make it official." The judge smiled. "Well then, dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. It was the strangest wedding in territorial history, bride holding a shotgun, groom bearing burn scars, witnesses armed to the teeth, and the defeated villains being led away in shackles. But when Asa kissed her, The crowd erupted in cheers that echoed off the mountains. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "Have since that first morning." "I know," she whispered back, "even when you tried to hide it." "Uncle Asa," Lydia's voice piped up from the cellar door. "Can we come out now?" "Yes, sweetheart, it's safe." The girls ran to them, and Asa swept them up despite his healing burns. They stood there, a family forged by choice and trial, surrounded by a community that had finally chosen courage over fear. "What happens now?" Annie asked, speaking more words at once than she had in months. Temperance looked at her new husband, at their daughters, at their neighbors who'd risked everything to stand with them. "Now," she said, "we rebuild, together." The Red Dawn had fulfilled its promise, but not in the way anyone expected. Blood had been spilled just a little, but from it grew something stronger than violence. Community. Justice, hope, and love, always love. The dust settled slowly, like a benediction over the ranch that had seen so much struggle. 6 months had passed since that morning of confrontation, and the McGraw Ranch bore the marks of both hardship overcome and hope renewed. Where the burned barn once stood, a new structure rose, smaller but sturdy, built by neighbors who came each Sunday after church to lend their hands and hearts. Temperance stood in her kitchen, truly hers now, not just by work, but by right, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. The cast-iron skillet that had been her anchor through the storm sat on the stove, seasoned by 1,000 meals, polished by loving hands. Beside it, new pots gleamed, wedding gifts from the townswomen who now called her friend. "Smells wonderful in here," Asa said, coming up behind her. His arms encircled her waist, and she leaned back into his warmth. The burns had healed, leaving scars that she sometimes traced with gentle fingers, reminders of all they'd survived. "Beef stew," she said, "with vegetables from our own garden. Can you believe it? We actually grew something in this dust." "You grew something? I just hauled water." She turned in his arms, studying his face. The harsh lines had softened these past months. He smiled more readily, laughed at the girls' antics, even joined in their evening singing sometimes. The broken soldier she'd first met had found his way home, not to a place, but to a purpose, a family, a future worth fighting for. "We grew something," she corrected, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "Together." The kitchen door burst open, and Lydia tumbled in, Annie close behind. Both girls were dusty from play, but glowing with health and happiness. "Papa Asa," Lydia exclaimed. They'd started calling him that after the wedding, and it never failed to bring a suspicious shine to his eyes. "Tom says the cattle buyers are coming tomorrow. He says we might get top price." "Might," Asa cautioned, but his smile was hopeful. The small herd they'd managed to save had thrived on the late rains that finally came. Not enough to pay all debts, but enough to keep the wolves at bay. "And Mrs. Morrison says I can help teach the little ones at the new school," Annie added proudly. At 8, she was the star pupil, making up for lost time with voracious reading. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Temperance said, smoothing the girl's hair. "Now go wash up. Supper's almost ready." The girls scampered off, their laughter echoing through the house that had once seemed so cold and empty. Now it rang with life, with possibility, with the everyday miracles of a family making its way. Frank appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "Riders coming in. Looks like Judge Morrison and some others." Asa frowned. "Trouble?" "Don't think so. They're not riding hard. They went out to meet their visitors." Temperance automatically checking that her apron was clean, her hair properly pinned. Some habits from her former life died hard, but she no longer felt shame about her past. It had led her here, and here was exactly where she belonged. Judge Morrison dismounted with a broad smile. "Evening, folks. Hope we're not interrupting supper." "You're always welcome, Judge," Asa said. "What brings you out?" "Good news. For once." The judge produced an official-looking envelope. From the territorial governor himself. In light of recent events and certain testimonies, Wade had sung like a canary to avoid the worst charges. All of Hutchinson's contracts in the valley have been declared null and void. The debts are cleared. Asa, the ranch is yours, free and clear. Temperance gripped Asa's arm, feeling him tremble. Are you certain? Certain as law can make it. Hutchinson's assets were seized to compensate his victims. You'll even receive a settlement for the barn and the poisoned well. The judge's eyes twinkled. Enough to get back on your feet properly. I don't, Asa's voice broke. Thank you. Thank all of you. Thank your wife, one of the other men said. If she hadn't stood up to him, made us all look at what we were allowing to happen, well, courage is catching, it seems. They stayed for supper, crowding around the big table, filling the house with talk and laughter. Temperance served her stew with pride, using her mother's skillet for the cornbread, accepting compliments with grace. She caught Asa watching her sometimes, wonder in his eyes, and her heart felt too large for her chest. Later, after the visitors had gone and the girls were tucked in bed, she and Asa sat on the porch in the old rocking chairs Tom and Frank had repaired as a wedding gift. The night was cool but not cold, autumn approaching with its promise of harvest and rest. Do you ever think about it? Asa asked quietly. How different it all could have been. If the driver hadn't gotten lost, if I'd made it to Lattimore's, she considered. Sometimes, but not with regret. Truly, truly. She reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers. I would have been safe at Lattimore's, comfortable, maybe, but I wouldn't have been needed. I wouldn't have found my fight, my purpose. I wouldn't have found you. I wasn't much of a find. Broken-down soldier with a failing ranch and too much pride. You were exactly what I needed. Someone who saw past what I'd done to who I could become. Someone who gave me a chance to be more than my mistakes. He brought their joined hands to his lips. You saved us all. You know that, don't you? We saved each other. That's what family does. They rocked in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the vast western sky. Inside, one of the girls coughed in her sleep, then settled. From the bunkhouse came the low murmur of Tom and Frank playing cards, arguing good-naturedly about who owed whom money. I've been thinking, Asa said eventually. With the settlement money, we could expand, build a proper schoolhouse for the valley, maybe start a library. Annie's not the only child hungry for books. And a meeting hall, Temperance added, warming to the idea. Somewhere folks could gather that isn't the saloon. Somewhere families could come together. The Hartwell-McGraw Community Center, he suggested with a smile. Just McGraw, she said. I'm all McGraw now. He stood, drawing her up with him. Dance with me. There's no music. There's always music. He pulled her close, and they swayed together on the porch, surrounded by the night sounds of their ranch, their home. Listen. She did, hearing the wind in the grass, the distant call of night birds, the creak of the windmill they'd finally been able to repair. It was a symphony of survival, of ordinary life made precious by how close they'd come to losing it. I love you, she whispered against his chest. Thank you for sending me to the wrong ranch. Thank God for incompetent drivers, he agreed, making her laugh. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and eternal, but no longer out of reach. They'd grabbed their own stars, not the glittering promises of easy wealth, but the steady lights of home, family, community, worth more than all the gold in California. She thought of her mother's last words. Let it be your anchor. The skillet had anchored her through the storm, but now she had so much more to hold her steady. A husband who'd walked through fire for what he loved. Daughters who called her Mama Temperance when they thought she wasn't listening. Friends who'd stood with rifles to defend their right to this life. Ready to go in? Asa asked. In a moment. She wanted to hold on to this, the peace after battle, the quiet after storm. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Cattle to sell, bills to pay, a ranch to run, children to raise. But tonight, she was simply a woman standing with her husband on land they'd bled for, beneath stars that blessed their victory. The cast-iron skillet waited in the kitchen, ready for tomorrow's breakfast. It would feed their family as it had fed her mother's, seasoned now with new memories, new hopes. But it was no longer her only anchor. She was home. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Temperance and Asa's journey from that stormy night to their hard-won happiness. Where are you listening to this tale today? Perhaps during your commute, while relaxing at home, or maybe even somewhere out in the wide-open spaces that our characters would recognize. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Please subscribe to From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier stories. And share your thoughts about Temperance's courage, Asa's redemption, or any part of their story that touched your heart. Until our next adventure, partners.